may be seated this morning. Any of you listen to WLRN radio, especially on Saturday mornings?
Yep.
If you do, at the 10 o'clock hour, there's two announcers that come on. Somebody's smiling, I think, why not? Must listen. And at the end of their program, at the end of their 1 hour long program, they say, without fail, "Well, you did it again. You wasted another perfectly good hour listening to car talk." And it's car talk because they're up in Boston, Mac. And so they say you wasted that perfectly good hour. Have any of you ever listened to that show?
Click and clap.
They not only diagnose the problems of your car, they also will diagnose your relationship issues. So if there's a way that if you're calling in, that you can blame it on a spouse or a girlfriend or whatever, something has gone wrong in your car, they will more than likely back you up. Though there have been times when that backfires on people. They have just done a tremendous show. But now the question of, if any of you know their history, you'll know that one of the two brothers, they call themselves Click and Clack, the Tappet brothers, but their real family name is Magliozzi. And if you know them at all, then you'll know that last year, Tom Magliozzi passed away, almost a year ago. But in fact, the truth of the matter is that they have stopped producing shows back in 2012. And it took me a couple of years of continuing to listen to figure out that what I was listening to was not a call-in show, because people would call in, but it was repeats. And I finally figured out that all these people could not still be running their 1982 VW Jettas with 200,000 miles in 2016. I said, something's up here, and I finally figured it out, that these were actually repeats. They were playing the show again. And so I have this existential question that if, when you listen to the show, that they say you have wasted another perfectly good hour listening to the show, if that's what happens the first time it's aired, what are you doing when it's a repeat and you've already wasted an hour, now you're wasting it again? So there's an existential question, you can think about that. But yesterday, a group of us wasn't wasting a perfectly good hour. In fact, we were here yesterday morning and we missed the show. I didn't get to hear this week's repeat. And in the process of missing the show, not only were we here for the hour that the show was on, but we were here for not even an hour or 2 hours, but I think by the time we ended it was like 11:26, I think that's what Jim called it. Almost 3-hour long meeting. And I'm talking about your council folks, doing the hard work, reviewing the documents, assessing the church's insurance needs for, say, directors and officers' insurance, making sure that, for example, we're covered if a picture gets taken of our children during the Sunday morning, presentation and gets put on Facebook, and making sure that we're covered. Making sure that we're covered in case the choir director chooses a hymn to sing that has so many stanzas that Marissa passes out from lack of oxygen. Okay, and the possibility that she could sue us. We had to make sure that those possibilities are covered. And sometimes it might just be sing a few less stanzas or pick a shorter version. But if you haven't seen her, when Charles was still able to come, we at least knew that she could have a little oxygen from him. But now we have to check, right? And so we continue to do the hard work, checking the numbers, checking our income, checking our outgo. Thank God for our new treasurer. If any of you only know her as the woman who plays I was going to say a mean violin. It's not a mean, it's a sweet violin. She plays for us every so often. But Renee is also an accountant, works for Broward District Schools, and is our new treasurer. And boy, I tell you, she's so good. When she puts her report together, she is at a remote location. We can call her and ask her. We almost don't even have any questions because it's so well put together. And she can answer those questions wherever she's at. Thank God for her. But we're checking all the numbers and checking our attendance, checking our way and tweaking our way of being church. Because in this time where things are changing so rapidly, how we are church needs to be shifted and changed. And you know, being on council is such a popular job. Marissa, say, how popular is it?
How popular is it?
I'll tell you how popular it is. I'll tell you, in the last month, 2 people have actually faked resignations from their jobs, moved out of state just to get off the council. And we've actually had 4 resignations from council already this year. So our group is shrinking. But the work we do is important work in order to keep the church going. And yet I can't help but think, as we hear this morning's gospel presentation, that Jesus wants us to keep in mind what are the things that are really important. And that's what he does in the gospel today. And he does it in the context of a meal. You know, all the important things that Jesus... Jim, maybe we can start having a meal. No, I don't think we better do that. We're long enough already. Everything that Jesus does that's important, that is life-changing, he does it around a meal, sharing together what is going on in life. And there he shares with us that it's not the numbers lining up that make us a successful church. It's not who we are sitting near to or next to. It's especially not who we think we ourselves are. You know, as a pastor, habits are important. You know, and knowing that people are people of habit is important. I can pretty much tell who's here and who's not here because most of you, out of habit, sit in just about the same space every week. You know, of course, when we decide to move the whole thing around, it's kind of hard to figure it out, but people find their new place and sit there, and so we know where everyone is. And it went through my mind in preparation for the sermon today that I should just have people, you know, I should just take the time and have people who sit way in the back and bring them all the way to the front, because that's what the gospel says today, right? That's the story. But then it's also to take the people to the front to the back, and we never have anybody to the front, so that part didn't work out so well. It's not about who we sit next to or who we sit near. It's not about who we think of ourselves as being, unless we can say that we are... Thank you. Somebody was paying attention to the German sermon. Unless we can say that we are dirt. But rather, what life is all about is about who we invite and how we relate to those that we invite to come and be part of. It's not about counting pennies and making sure that we have enough, but rather it's about living in and living with an understanding of God's abundance in our lives. Now, I can tell you, you can turn on the TV, and whether it's a commercial or a political ad or anything else that's going on, the message is there is not enough. That's the message that's out there. Everybody is telling you there is not enough, and so you better make sure you get everything you can get your hands on and hang on to it, because there is not enough. But Jesus is trying to say there's plenty of room at the table. There is plenty of opportunity for us to share together all that God has provided. There is an abundance. When there are people in this world who go hungry, it's not because there is not enough. It's because some people have gathered so much for themselves that it's not shared with those who need it the most. I read a story this week about a family, a rather large family. There were 5 kids in the family. And the person who was writing it said that in their family, they had this tradition at Christmas time. And since we're getting ready to do Christmas shoeboxes and all that, it seemed appropriate. So their tradition at Christmas time was one child in the family would be designated as Santa's helper. Do you know what Santa's helper got to do? They got to not pick up any of their own presents, But they got to go around and find all the presents and say, oh, this one's for you. And oh, this one's for you. And then they got to pass out the presents. There was an abundance of presents, right? I mean, most of the people I know, Christmas trees tend to be, there's more under there than there probably ought to be, right? And so there's an abundance, and the kid gets to pass. Now, when you're young, that's really an awful job, because you really have to express some delayed gratification. Now, I got to wait until the end to get mine, to get the things that have my name on it, even though I'm seeing them there, but I got to deliver everybody else's. That's my job. But when you got older, he said, in the family, that became such an honored role, such a coveted role, to be the one who gets to hand out the gifts to everybody else. To operate out of an abundance and say, here, this is for you, and here, this is for you, and everybody gets something. And to gracefully deliver the package to its final recipient, to brothers and sisters, is a joy and a blessing, and becomes a profoundly satisfying role in the family, to be the one who gave out the gifts. To recognize that it's in giving away to others that we are truly the most blessed of all. You know that saying that they say it is better to give than to receive, and we say it and we stop really thinking about what it means. But when we consider what it means to give somebody something that has nothing, I thought about that story and I thought, where in my own life have I experienced something like that? And I came up with two situations that I remembered. One was when I was the director of the food pantry at Greenbrier in Columbus. A few blocks away from the seminary, there was a housing project, and I was the director. Now, if I say director, I'm automatically telling you that I was not being the dirt of the earth, okay? Because director sounds like a really nice title. Well, I was the director of a very part-time program, and as the director, I was the only person working there. I was a work-study part-time student, part-time employee working under the auspices of Lutheran Social Services of Ohio, which everybody, knew the main food pantry on Champion. They just said, send me to Lutheran. That's where they wanted to go because they knew they'd be well. We were a satellite campus, and I was the director of the satellite campus. I used to drive there in my beat-up old Toyota Celica and fill stuff into my trunk and then run it up to Greenbrier to supply. And so when I was there, and people would come to receive their food, and we would give them whatever it was that was appointed, and we had to keep the numbers, okay? We needed Renee there to help us keep account of everything, because we had to keep on track of how many families came, how often the families came, how many people were in each family, what they were allowed to get, how many cans of beans, or bags of beans, how many cans of vegetables, how many bottles of peanut butter. All that had to be accounted for, and we had to make sure that we didn't give away too much or too little. If you give away too little, then you don't get a new supply in. But if you give away too much, then you don't have for when the next person comes. And so all of that was very carefully regulated. And we did. It was a blessing to work there, and sometimes the people who were receiving food would get involved and would help make up the packages, and we would work together, because the truth of the matter was, as a work-study student, I was only a half a step away from being one of the customers there anyhow. But the part that made that job so amazing was that there was a place down the road that was called Sammy's New York Bagels. Now, as a New Yorker who enjoys New York bagels, if any of you have ever had a New York bagel, to see Sammy's New York Bagels right there in Columbus was a tremendous blessing. But it went further than that, you see, because the guy who ran the place, whose franchise it was an Orthodox Jew. And he said, I have studied the Scripture, and I have studied the Torah, and I know the policies of my company. So when I make bagels, when we bake bagels, we sell them as fresh up until they turn to be 6 hours old. After 6 hours, they're considered like day-old bagels. They're no longer fresh. They can no longer sell them. And he says, and I can look in my company manual, and it tells me what I should do. I have to discard them. I have to throw them away. He says, but that for me is in direct conflict with what I read in the Torah. In the Torah, it tells me that the sojourner and the widow and the orphan and the poor among us should have an opportunity for those things that they cannot buy themselves. So he made contact as an Orthodox Jew with Luther. And Luther called me and said, they're close by where you are. Can you work something out? And so every day when I went to open up the pantry, I would go to Sammy's New York Bagels. I would go in the back door. He says, you don't have to ask for me or ask for anybody. You're going to see a huge, big bag, a clear bag, like an industrial-sized bag of bagels. He says, whatever's in there, he just said, tie it up, take it with you. Folks, sometimes I couldn't close the trunk of my beat-up Toyota Celica because I had so many bagels in there. And we would take them to the food pantry. We would take Ziploc bags and put half a dozen in each Ziploc bag. And then we'd say, how many people in your family? 4? Give them 4 bags. So that's what? 12 bagels? No, what's my math here? 6, 12, 24 bagels, right? Just give them away. Well, we were giving away bagels left and right. And at the end of the day, we still had some left over. And I'd take those back to the seminary and put them in my daughter's wagon and walk around the seminary. And just people would come out of their apartments and get bagels. And it was such a kingdom of God moment. I really believe that if Jesus was walking not in Nazareth, but had been walking in Columbus, he would have said, the kingdom of God is like Sammy's New York Bagels. And to experience the joy that people had, it wasn't about this piece of doughy bread with a hole in the center. It was about getting something of sustenance and receiving it and being the conduit by which to give it away and to give it on. It made me realize that maybe I was just dirt, but there was a blessing in being able to do that. I told you I thought of 2 situations. The other was years later when I was an ordained pastor serving in Queens, and I was on the Queens board of Habitat for Humanity, working shoulder to shoulder with people who were doing sweat equity partners. Do you know what a sweat equity partner is? Okay, these are people who are looking to get into a home but don't have the financial means, but they put in hours of work alongside with volunteers to build their own home. When I talk about a homeowner, they know where every wire runs, where every pipe runs, where every drywall is hung. They know it all. And we work with them side by side, but the joy would come when we had a habitation. Now, habitation is an interesting word. I don't think it's in the dictionary. It's a combination of habitat and celebration. And it's that day when the community comes together and there is singing and there is prayers and there are scriptures, and then finally the sacramental moment when the director hands the keys to the sweat equity partner who now becomes a homeowner. And they have a home to live in. And you know what? They have to pay a mortgage. You know what the interest rate is on their mortgage? 0%. They pay back 0%. So that, not that their house can be paid off, but actually so that the money can go into the fund for the next house to be built. And so to be part of that, to be able to experience the joy, the tears that come when someone's life has been changed, that had been paying exorbitant rent to a landlord somewhere, now have the keys of their very own home. Do you know that can be life-changing? And so those were moments that I thought about. The relationships that build. When we think of ourselves not as higher than or better than, but humble ourselves and become, Jesus said, like dirt. And then we can hear the words that Jesus speaks to the guests and even to the one who's throwing the party, not as imperatives, not as instructions, not as in, you need to do this, go sit down lower when you come in and don't sit up high, and when you invite people, don't invite the ones that can repay you by having their own party and inviting you, bring in those are not instructions or imperatives, they become invitations. Invitations for us to become the ones who bless others. To live with our sisters and brothers humbly as one, entertaining angels in the process, as we heard from Hebrews. So this morning, I leave you just with these 3 simple words. Enjoy the meal that God has provided us. In the name of the Father, and the Son,